And she said, Danny, somebody's in your room. And we looked up at the ship, and all of a sudden, the porthole curtain just jerked back, and the head came up to the porthole window, was looking out. She screamed, you see it? I said, yeah, I see it. I thought, my God, I'm actually looking at the ghost.
North Carolina's coast, stretching more than 300 miles, is renowned for its stunning natural beauty, unique history, and diverse ecosystems. This is where the Wright brothers first took flight and is home to the tallest lighthouse in the United States. But it's also where thousands of ships have met violent ends on shallow, shifting sandbars, giving the region its ominous name, the Graveyard of the Atlantic. Welcome to First in Fright, the podcast where we uncover eerie legends, ghostly encounters, and supernatural phenomena that make North Carolina the spookiest, most haunted, and paranormal place in America. I'm your host, Cooper Thornton. This is Episode 8, Creepy Coast. Our local storyteller recounts spine-tingling mysteries that lurk in every corner of the coast.
Edward Teach was one of the most fearsome pirates to ever live. Now I know what you're probably thinking. The name Edward Teach doesn't exactly inspire dread, which is probably why he changed it to Blackbeard. His legacy is the inspiration for some of the most famous depictions of pirates throughout much of our literature and film. But Teach hadn't always been on the wrong side of the law. For years, he worked as a privateer in the British Navy, hired to harass and capture French and Spanish merchant vessels during the Queen's Anne War. But then the war ended. Teach found himself out of a job, and like many in his profession, he turned to piracy. From the deck of his formidable flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, which boasted a crew of 300 ruthless men and 40 powerful cannons, Blackbeard terrorized the West Indies and the coastline of Britain's American colonies in the early 18th century. With a black beard that he braided and adorned with slow-burning fuses during battle, a bright crimson coat, 2 swords at each hip, and his pockets stuffed with assorted pistols and knives, the opposing Blackbeard was a terrifying, larger-than-life figure. His exploits became legendary. He went up and down the eastern seaboard, pillaging unsuspecting ships off the coast of North and South Carolina, ransacking commercial ports, and even holding entire cities hostage. He began using Ocracoke Island as his hideout. The labyrinthian inlets and shallow waters of the Outer Banks were a perfect place to hide out. And as more and more ships fell victim to the pirate, the residents of North Carolina begged Virginia Governor Alexander Spotswood to intervene. Using information obtained from a captured member of Blackbeard's crew, Spotswood dispatched 2 well-equipped ships to Ocracoke Island under the command of Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Their mission: bring Blackbeard back, dead or alive. On November 22, 1718, Maynard attacked. In a vicious hand-to-hand confrontation atop the deck of Maynard's ship, Blackbeard was killed, having been shot at least 5 times and stabbed more than 20 times. His head was severed from his body, and Maynard hung it from the bowsprit of his ship as a grim trophy, a warning to the other pirates. But Blackbeard's story doesn't end with his death. The pirate's headless body was thrown overboard where, legend has it, it swam around Maynard's ship 3 times before finally sinking below the waters. Ever since then, it has been said that Blackbeard's ghost haunts the cove where he died, known today as Teach's Hole. Sailors and locals have reported seeing a headless figure, shrouded in mist, wandering the beaches of Ocracoke Island. The eerie glow of his phantom lantern is said to appear on stormy nights, bobbing on the waves, leading ships astray. There are even those who claim they have heard his otherworldly voice, calling out, "Where's my head?" Some legends never die.
So the next time you find yourself on the shores of North Carolina, listen closely. You might just hear Blackbeard's voice, forever bound to the place where he met his bloody end. But Blackbeard's ghost isn't alone on the shores of Ocracoke Island.
Many German immigrants coming to the New World in the late 17th and early 18th centuries were skilled craftsmen and trade workers. On one particular voyage, so the story goes, the captain of a chartered vessel taking European colonists to the province of Carolina recognized that many of these families aboard his ship were well-to-do. They brought with them an unusual amount of gold and jewels with which to start their new lives. Before long, the captain got a diabolical idea and soon enlisted his entire crew in a nefarious plot. On the final night of the voyage, the passengers were sleeping soundly below decks. As the ship finally drew within sight of the Outer Banks, the captain and his crew slit the throats of every man, woman, and child aboard. Then they gathered up all their loot and stuffed it into the longboat bound to the side of the vessel. To cover up their heinous crime, they set fire to the ship. As the flames began to engulf the vessel, the crew rowed toward nearby Ocracoke Island, rowdy and delirious in their success. But a few minutes later, one of the men noticed something odd. The ship suddenly, impossibly, turned toward them. Doubtless, one of his mates told him that it was just drifting uncontrollably as it burned. But a few moments later, they realized, to their horror, that the fire ship was now bearing down on them with terrifying speed. The men quickly began straining against their oars, trying to move the longboat out of the way. But no matter how fast they rowed or which direction they steered, the fire ship altered course to follow them. Try as they might, they could not evade it. As the burning ship was about to overtake them, they looked up to see the charred remains of the murdered colonist standing along the gunwale, staring down at them, their faces illuminated by the raging flames and twisted in eternal agony. Soon, the crew and their ill-gotten loot were sent to the bottom of the sea. But that wasn't the end. To this day, on the night of the first new moon each September, locals report sighting a phantom ship on the horizon, its mast and rigging wreathed in roaring flames. The fire ship of Ocracoke Island, as it has come to be known, can still be seen racing across the waves, cutting through the night. Witnesses speak of hearing the anguished cries of the doomed passengers, carried by the wind as the ship disappears into the night.
Just 35 miles away is Cape Hatteras, which frequently finds itself in the crosshairs of some of the Atlantic's most powerful hurricanes. And it's because of this that a mysterious figure has been seen on its sandy beaches since 1822.
Picture, if you will, a stormy evening on the coast. The sky is dark, and the wind howls as a figure emerges from the mist. Clad in old-fashioned gray clothing, he walks silently along the beach. This is the Gray Man, a spectral figure whose appearances are said to foretell hurricanes and other natural disasters. His presence is both eerie and comforting, for those who heed his warnings often survive the storms that follow. Over the years, sightings of the Gray Man have been reported before every major hurricane that's hit the coast. One of the most notable accounts comes from 1954, just days before Hurricane Hazel made landfall. A local couple, walking their dog on the beach, spotted a man in gray, standing motionless in the distance. As they approached, he vanished into thin air. Frightened, they took his appearance as a bad omen and evacuated their home. When Hazel struck, it left a trail of destruction, but the couple's home was spared. Again, in 1989, just before Hurricane Hugo devastated the Carolinas. The gray man was seen walking the beach. Those who saw him recalled his warning presence and evacuated their homes, surviving Hugo's wrath. This pattern has continued, with reports of the gray man appearing before Hurricanes Fran in 1996 and Florence in 2018. His presence has become an integral part of North Carolina's coastal folklore, a ghostly guardian watching over the shoreline and its inhabitants.
Our next account on North Carolina's coast combines both heroism and horror. Nicknamed the Showboat, the 35,000-ton battleship USS North Carolina participated in every major naval offensive in the Pacific Theater and became the single most decorated American battleship of the entire war. Amazingly, by the war's end, the ship had lost only 10 men in action. Half of those lost their lives on September 15, 1942, when a Japanese submarine launched torpedoes and struck the North Carolina. The 890-pound warhead impacted 20 feet below the waterline on the battleship's port side and ripped a 32 by 18-foot hole in its armor plating. 5 men were killed instantly. Thankfully, damage control teams were able to stop the flooding and right the ship, which finished the war. In 1962, it was installed as the state's World War II memorial and currently rests in historic downtown Wilmington, attracting roughly 250,000 visitors annually. The scars from her battle damage are still visible, but others are harder to see. It turns out the 85-year-old floating museum is one of North Carolina's most haunted locations. Ever since it was installed, visitors have experienced things they cannot explain and would rather forget. One person more than any other knows the truth.
My name is Danny Bradshaw. I was the night watchman at the USS North Carolina Battleship Memorial for 35 years. My best friend, he stayed on it at night, like 6 nights a week. I said, look, when you get ready to leave, how about getting this job for me? He said, I'll look out for you. My father was a car dealer. I could work with him in the daytime and then do this at night. My buddy told me, he said, I got you the job. He said, there's something you need to know. And I said, what's that? He said, the job's not so easy. And I said, what's the problem? He said, there's ghosts. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, it's just things that are unexplainable, you know. And I said, well, what's he going to do? And he started naming off stuff, you know, knocking on your door in the middle of the night, running down the hallways, those things, you know. He said, when these things happen, you can holler and scream all you want. Nobody's going to hear you. Just get off the ship and sleep in the car. And I said, well, we'll see. He said, okay. He said, you'll call me. We're best friends, and I couldn't understand why he would make that up to scare me. I mean, because he got me the job. But then I'm the type of person, you know, I want to see for myself, you know. The first major encounter I had was about 10 months into the job. I was in the room one night. I had a lamp, and I wanted a table or something to set it on. So I called him up, and I said, you doing anything? He said, no. I'll come over there, and we'll go find one. I said, okay. So he came over, and we went down below the main deck, and we come up on this big, thick hatch. It probably weighs 600, 700, 800 pounds, and it was pulled way back, and it had a hook on it so that no way for it to fall forward. In fact, even if you were to take the hook off, the way it was tilted back, it wouldn't fall forward anyway. It just fall maybe further back, whatever, you know. Where that hatch was, there was a little ladder, and you had to go down there to get to the tables. I said, look, while you're down there, you just look around, whatever and all. I got to go make a phone call. He said, yeah, go ahead. So I left. I came back about 20, 25 minutes later. As I was walking down the passageway, it's all dark, and I had my flashlight, and I shone my light up towards his face, and I saw a look on his face of pure horror. I'd never seen it before. I said, what's wrong with you? And he said, when did you get back? And I said, I just got back. Why? He said, we need to get out of here. And I said, why? And he said it again, only more for it. He said, we need to get out of here. And once we got outside up on the main deck, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Danny, you've been gone maybe 10 minutes or so." And he said, "I'm down there looking for a table." He said, "All of a sudden I hear a crashing noise." It was that big hatch, that 700-pound hatch fell. He said, "You know as good as I do, there's no way for that thing to fall. It had a hook on it. It's tilted back. Somebody would literally have to get behind it and slam it down. They made it that way because the thing was so heavy a sailor could get killed accidentally, you know." I said, "How did you get out of a 600 or 700-pound hatch falling down like that?" He said, "On the other side of the ship, there's parallel ladders on both sides." He said, "I went over there to that side and looked up," and he said, "Thank God that hatch was open too." So I walked him down to his car, and he said, "Do yourself a favor. Don't ever go down there by yourself, okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not," whatever else. So he said, "I'll talk to you later on." I said, "Okay." So he left. I went back up on the ship. You know how guys are. Sometimes we like to test ourselves just to see if we got the guts to do things, you know. So I decided I had the great idea to go back down there by myself. I walked around there to where that open hatch was, and I was leaning over, and I was debating on whether to try to climb down that little ladder. And what happened is a voice behind me hollered out, "Get out of here." I mean, real loud. I almost fell over. It scared me so bad. I started running. I hadn't got too far, and all of a sudden I heard a crashing noise. It was the hatch fail. I knew what it was. And it really shook me bad. I stayed in the car about 3 or 4 nights in a row. But after a little while, that got old. And so I thought, well, I'll go back up there and see how it goes, you know. And I went back to my room after about 3 or 4 nights in the car, and everything was fine. A friend of mine, she called up. She said, "I want to bring you something to eat, Joe." And I said, "Yeah, sure." And she'd been over before. She knew where my room was, which was an exact officer's quarters. It was on the main deck. I had a living room, a little bedroom, and a bathroom. I got like 4 porthole windows that I can look out in the parking lot. And when you look up on the ship at night, you can see where my room is because the lights are shining through the porthole windows, you know. So I walked off the ship. And she said, "Who's your company?" And I said, "You are. What are you talking about?" She said, "Danny, somebody's in your room." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "When I didn't see you, I blowed the horn. And after a little while, I see a porthole curtain pull back and a head look out." I said, "Were you for real?" She said, "Yeah, I'm telling you the truth." And we looked up at the ship, and all of a sudden, the porthole curtain just jerked back, and the head came up to the porthole window and was looking out. You couldn't tell as far as what he looked like or anything, but you could make out a head looking out. She screamed, "You see it?" I said, "Yeah, I see it. I see it." I thought, my God, I'm actually looking at the ghost. She left. And so I went back up to my room, and whenever I walk out of my room at night, I have a lock in it that I can lock it from the outside to where you can't just, open the door and go in. And so I thought, well, hopefully when I get up there, somebody was on the ship and I didn't know it, and they broke the lock and went in my room. That would explain it. But that's not what happened. When I got to my room, the lock was still there. So I knew nobody had got in there. And so I took the lock off and I walked in there and looked, nothing. There was nobody in there. Everything was fine. So I stayed in the car again that night too. In the summertime, at night, it was an outdoor show type thing. And what would happen, lights would shine on the ship, the guns would shoot out a flame, simulating a battle. And this show got over about 10, 3, 11 at night. And whenever it got over, there was a power box down below, and that power box controlled the big floodlights that shine on the ship. So that was the last thing that I had to do after everybody left and cut that power box off. All of a sudden, a hand laid up on my shoulder. Oh, God, it scared me bad. But what happened, my fear really sort of turned into anger, because I thought one of them guys that worked for me, he had snuck down there and was waiting for me, just to scare me. So as I turned around, I had the flashlight. Well, I didn't see him. And I'm shining this light over this big room when all of a sudden, off to my left, I hear footsteps. It was like somebody wearing hard shoes on that metal floor. I jerked my light real quick to the left. It was the ghost. He was standing right there in the passageway door. And when I saw it, I lost it. It was an image of a man, but it was his head. His head was on fire. He had white flames shooting out of his head. He was actually looking straight ahead. And when I saw this, I screamed. I screamed loud. And he turned his head towards me, and he had a look on his face like, "Don't do that," and turned his head back away and disappeared. I was in such a state of panic. The number one thing I wanted to do was get out from down there. I wanted to get back up onto the main deck of the ship outside. And so I ran around to the other side, the starboard side of the ship, going up. And at the top of them stairs, I hear footsteps running down at me. And I started screaming. I said, "Oh, Lord President, Jesus, please let me get out of here." And I took one step at a time and got out. And that was it. Needless to say, I stayed in the car about 5 or 6 nights in a row then. I really come close to quitting. I didn't want to tell my daddy, "Well, I quit my job." And he said, "Well, son, what happened? I saw a ghost or heard a ghost or something." "Yeah, right. Get your butt back up there. Go to work." I didn't want to deal with that, the shame or whatever. I didn't care. I was scared to death. You never really get over it. It's always on your mind. When you go through something like that, it was always on my mind. So after a period of time went by, I began to try to put it out of my mind best I could. The next time I saw him, it was a few years later. My cousin, Tommy, he's like my brother. He used to come over to hang out with me some. And as far as the ghost thing and all, he didn't handle that stuff too good. And so whenever he would come over, he wouldn't really stay too long. And we'd been hanging out in the room and we were watching TV. And then all of a sudden he said, "Hey, get me out of here." He said, "This place just freaks me out." Well, the thing about it was, I wasn't feeling real comfortable either. The thing about the ghost is sometimes you can feel his presence and sometimes you can't. And so I walked him on off the ship, and when I got back up to the room, the first thing that I noticed was my TV was off. And I know it was on because we were sitting there watching it, So I turned around and I shut the door behind me. All of a sudden, I heard the TV come on. And it was getting louder and louder and louder. And then all of a sudden, sometimes you get a feel like somebody watching you or something. I looked to my left towards the door. The ghost was standing right there. It was the same one that I saw down below. The white flame in the head and all this kind of stuff. He was looking straight ahead like he was looking out one of the porthole windows. Oh, Lord, I screamed. And whenever I screamed, he just turned towards me, gave me another look, and then disappeared. And that was it. Needless to say, I stayed in the car, and I did not tell my cousin about it because if I did, I knew he'd never come over there. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, and this is crazy. The family home, before I sold it, I'd stayed there about one night off. The family that lived across the street, I'd know them. They'd been living there a right good while. She called up and she said, "Danny, I got some family coming from Greensboro. Will you walk around and tell them about the ghost?" Well, I really didn't want to do it, but he's your neighbor. What are you going to do? And I said, "Yeah, come on, whatever." So they came over and I walked them around. I gave them a tour, told them all the stories, the stuff that happened to me and other people working there, and they left. No encounters. They had a good time. That was on a Sunday night. The following Thursday afternoon, I was out there raking yard and she sees me. She said, "I want to ask you something. I want you to tell me the truth. Have you ever known him to go home with anybody?" And I said, Who are you talking about?" She said, "The ghost." I started laughing at her. She said, "I'm serious." I said, "I don't know. He can do anything he wants. I reckon. Why?" She said, "Danny,
For the last 3 days, our house has been a nightmare. Monday morning, I was home all by myself. I just finished taking a bath upstairs and I was drying off when all of a sudden my dog starts barking like crazy. I'm reaching for the doorknob to see what's the matter and boom, 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 there's a knock on the bathroom door. You have to understand, nobody else was in the house. My husband is away on business. Until later that night, I was home all alone. So I holler, "Who is it? Who's there?" No answer, no nothing. I tightened up my robe real good and waited for what felt like forever. I almost thought I had imagined this whole thing when boom, 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 it did it again. I yelled, I screamed, I lied, and told whoever it was that I'd called the cops. Again, nothing. About half an hour later, I thought, well, I can't stay in here all day. So I got my nerve up and I opened the door and no one was there. I look around in the house, nothing was out of place, but the dog came running up and he wouldn't leave my side the rest of the day. He kept acting like something was wrong. I called my husband and told him what happened, but he laughed at me. He thought I was making it all up. So the next night, Tuesday night, sometime mid-evening, my husband and I are sitting in the den watching TV when all of a sudden the dog starts growling. We're like, what? What is it? He runs to the corner of the room and he's jumping and lunging and we're looking at the dog like, what in God's name is wrong with you? It's like he's fighting something invisible. And then he yelps like something hit him and runs and jumps in between us. My husband looks at me and says, honey, I hate to say it, but they say dogs can sense ghosts. Do you think that ghost on Danny's ship came home with us? Wednesday, same thing, same time. About 7:30 or 8 o'clock, we're watching TV with the dog between us, when all of a sudden we hear footsteps going up the stairs right behind us. The dog spins around and begins barking like crazy all over again. He sees something going up those steps and we can totally hear it. I screamed. I jumped up. My husband, he jumped up. He said, my God. He grabs the fireplace poker and races upstairs and comes down about 10 minutes later. And he's like, honey, there's nobody here. Honey,
I don't know what to tell you. A few months later, they moved. Nothing happened at the ship, as far as I know. Nobody working there had any encounters whatsoever. 2 days after they moved, a girl went screaming, running out of the office. She had an encounter. So it's like he came back. People wondering like, well, who is the ghost, whatever it all. During the war, the ship was hit by a torpedo. And the torpedo busted right into the shower room where these guys were in there taking a shower. And it killed them, like 4 or 5 of them. And whenever they went in there to try to rescue them and all, one of them's head was on fire. And so they think that maybe that must be him. There's no way to know for sure, but that's what was told. There was another incident where I had one night off a week, and the guy that stayed on my night off, he had had some encounters too, and he was at people over and some of his buddies and girlfriend or whatever now. He said, Danny, you know my girlfriend, her nickname was Bambi, and I knew her. He said, well, let me tell you what happened. She came over last night, and they come across this picture. It showed a few of the crew members in a certain situation or whatever. So she hung around with him, and she got ready to leave about 11:30, 12 o'clock, whatever. And when she got in the car, she wasn't thinking about no ghost. Nothing had happened, you know. She started driving out of the parking lot. She said, I pull up to the stop sign, and there's a face in my rearview mirror. Somebody was sitting in the back seat. It looked like the same picture of one of the crew members. She just said, I lost it. She said, how in God's world I made it home, I don't know. The encounters happen in the daytime just like they do at night. There's an evil one up there. I felt the evil. It was the most horrible thing. Well, you know, evil does bad things. I had written a book about ghosts on the battleship, and I was doing a book signing. People would walk off that ship and tell me what happened to them. I was in there about 2-3 years or so before I retired, and this lady comes in. She says, I have never went through such a horror as I did on this ship a while ago. She said, I'm touring the ship. My husband's with me. We get down there in sick bay, and she says, all of a sudden, she says, I'm overwhelmed with a pure, raw evil. Which sort of sent chills into me, you know. And then all of a sudden, she said, a hand stroked my hair. That told me one thing. There's something in here. It's not me. I was fixing to say something to my husband, and the hand stroked my hair again, only this time where my hair ends, pulled it up and was trying to hang me. And that's when her husband spoke up. He said, buddy, she's telling you the truth. I hear a blood-curdling scream. I looked at my left. It's my wife. She's standing on her tiptoes. Her hair's up in the air, arms are waving. She's going crazy. I said, honey, my God, what is going on? She said, honey, something's trying to hang me. Do something. She said, I started screaming. And other tourists, they screamed and went the other way themselves. She said, I believe in Jesus. I started screaming his name. All of a sudden, the evil feeling left me. The hand let go of my hair, and it was over. I said, ma'am, I'm going to tell you something. I said, I've been through some bad stuff on here. But I said, that was all. Within 2 hours, 4 different families come over to me and says, there was a woman hanging by her hair screaming down there. So I knew they told me the truth. I did have this guy, and he brought something to my attention I hadn't thought about. He said, you've only had one encounter with this evil one in all the years you've been here. And I said, yeah. He said, well, this ship was out in the Pacific. Them Japanese kamikaze pilots, they got shot down, didn't they? And I said, yeah, the ship shot them down. And he said, yeah, they died right there. He said, how do you know it's not one of them? And I said, well, if you can apply logic to something like this, I said, I guess that makes sense. I guess maybe his spirit could have went back to the ship. Where is he going to go? You know, I had my doubts about the ghost stuff, but it made me a believer. I hear people, oh, there's no ghosts, there's no this, so and so and so and so, you know. And until you experience something like that, you really don't know. But when you go through something like this, then you really understand, like, my God, it's real. I spent so many, restless nights on there. It was pretty bad. I sleep good now because when I lay down at night, I have to worry about them noises like I heard on the ship at night. When I'd hear it, is that somebody broke on the ship? Is it the ghost? I'm sort of at peace now. I worked over there so long. I thought, well, what if he follows me? Thank God that didn't happen. I guess he loves the ship too good, which is fine with me.
We've come to the end of our eerie journey through North Carolina. From ghostly apparitions, haunted homes, hospitals, and roadways, to the murderous rampages of bizarre creatures lurking in forests and beneath lake waters. From witches to inexplicable lights in the sky and encounters with beings from another world. In this state, anything is possible. To learn more about the paranormal places and scary stories of North Carolina, visit ncfirstinfright.com. Discover trails and destinations that will haunt you in the best way, and share your own NC scare by tagging hashtag #NCFirstInFright. First in Fright is a production of Visit North Carolina, Luke Wire, and AYR Media. Hosted by me, Cooper Thornton. Executive producers Katie Bailey and Dana Grimstead for Visit North Carolina. Executive producers Nancy Landisberg, Michael Ashley, and Ryan Coleman for Luke Wire. Executive producer Eliza Rosen for AYR Media. Produced and written by Brandon Phibbs. Edited and mixed by Cameron Taggy. Casting producer Danielle Hillenbrand. AYR Media Coordinator Andy Levine. Voices by North Carolina storytellers Michael Cooper and Holly DeVries. Special thanks to Danny Bradshaw for sharing his story.